Hey everybody, Dr. Ann. Thank you for joining me. Today we are going to do some tapping, some emotional freedom technique on the subject of overwhelm. So if you're new to tapping, please watch the previous videos that go over the basics and then come back and join us. So I'm recording this in late April, and we are as a society really dealing with overwhelm, with what the effects of the pandemic are. And I feel like, especially as healthcare providers and helpers, that we have this tendency to always show up for everyone else. I mean, we literally have the responsibility as our job to be the ones that keep it together when other people are in crisis. Often putting our needs ahead of others, our need to sleep, our need to eat, our need to go to the bathroom. So overwhelm, I think, is something that is really important for us to address. In our training, I feel like in our medical training, we have a really good capacity to deal with an enormous amount of stress and overwhelm. However, we often do that at a cost. We often learn how to numb ourselves and really just to operate in survival mode so that we can show up for other people. So I invite you to try something a little different today with me, and let's really show up for ourselves. Okay, let's really acknowledge that we're struggling too, right? With the rest of the world, we're really struggling. And it's okay and actually healthy to admit that, right? Yeah. So let's do it. Okay, let's tap. We're gonna start by finding the kind of sore or sensitive spots underneath our collarbone. And I invite you to follow along, repeat after me. But if I'm saying something that really isn't resonating with you, that isn't really feeling true, or isn't really up for you in this moment, please change the words and the focus so that it really is giving you the most benefit, because your time is valuable. And this is really a way for each of us to show up for ourselves. So you're the priority here. I'm just a guide and giving some suggestions, and also showing up for myself. So let's take a nice deep breath, making some sound as it comes out. This overwhelm. Let's just tap in a circle on our chest. This overwhelm. Remember to repeat after me. There is so much uncertainty. And I'm open to the possibility that it's safe for me to admit that I'm dealing with a lot. Deep breath. And even though I'm able to deal with a lot, I'm open to the possibility that everything going on in the world everything going on in my life is overwhelming. Deep breath. Let's go underneath our rib, or right on the rib cage where our rib juts out. There's too much to deal with. So much to deal with. And it's overwhelming. Deep breath. Now side seam of the body. Again, you can either go like this or like this. And I invite you to really check in with your body and notice if there is any way that overwhelm is showing up as a sensation in your body. So for me, I'm feeling kind of some butterflies and an anxious feeling in my stomach. But check in with your body and see what's going on with you. Deep breath. Inside of the wrists. This sensation in my body. This sensation of anxiety. And if it's not anxiety for you, say what it is for you. The sensation of anxiety. I feel it in my I acknowledge that I've been dealing with a lot. Let's go to the back side of the wrist. I've been dealing with too much. And just kind of scan your life right now. And if you have a pen or paper, you might even want to make a note of what the top things are in your life. So for me, right now, it's too much worry and anxiety about society and the economy. That's a big one. So all of this worry about and for me, I'm going to say society. Now let's go to the karate chop point. I'm open to the possibility that it's safe for me to acknowledge that I'm overwhelmed by my concern for society. And then you can personalize it a little bit. So what is this going to mean for me? What is this going to mean for my patients? What is this going to mean for my family? What is this going to mean for my parents? What's this going to mean for my community? It's scary. Yeah. I acknowledge the part of me that's afraid to look at this. Deep breath. Let's go back to the top of the head. There's a part of me that's afraid to look at this. And I'm open to the possibility that maybe it's safe, maybe it's healthy for me to just glance at this, for me to just acknowledge and sit with this fear for just a few seconds. I don't want to get stuck in this fear. I'm already feeling overwhelmed. I'm already noticing that the people around me are overwhelmed. The people around me are stuck in fear. So part of me has been holding back from acknowledging this fear because we just can't afford to have everybody stuck in this fear. I can't afford to have everybody stuck in this fear. I can't afford to become overwhelmed by this fear, like so many people around me. My hospital can't afford for me to become overwhelmed and paralyzed by this fear. Deep breath. So even though part of me has been trying to ignore this, let's go to where the eyebrows start. Even though part of me has been trying to ignore this, even though part of me has been trying to stay strong for my sake and the sake of people in my community, people in my family, I'm open to the possibility that it's safe for me to just look at this fear. Deep breath. Side of the eyes. What if it's actually healthy for me to acknowledge that this fear exists? I'm open to the possibility that I am able to acknowledge this fear without becoming paralyzed or overwhelmed. Deep breath. Under the eyes. But there's a part of me that's afraid that if I really felt this fear, that I might freak out like so many others, that I might lose it, and that I might become overwhelmed. So I'm going to invite you to, I've talked about this before, about really allowing ourselves in these settings to create some space for our deepest, biggest, darkest fear, right? And actually give it permission so that we are not wasting our energy resisting it, fighting it. So let's do something that seems kind of radical right now and just really give ourselves permission to be overcome completely by our fear. Under the nose. I'm open to the possibility that it's safe for me to allow myself for just a few seconds to completely feel my fear. To allow myself to be overcome for just 1 second by my worst fear. That I will become completely overwhelmed. That I will be paralyzed. That I will completely freak out and won't be able to show up for myself or the people around me. That I will let myself down, and that I will let the people who depend on me down. I acknowledge this fear. And I'm open to acknowledging that it's probably going to happen. I'm open to acknowledging that I have become completely overwhelmed in the past. I've let myself down. I've let my patients down. I've let my family down. I've let people down. And I'm allowing myself to notice that I survived. I've become overwhelmed in the past, and I've survived. Let's go down to our chest. I'm allowing myself to remember that there have been plenty of times in my life, especially when I was a child, learning that I became completely overwhelmed, that I had meltdowns, that I had temper tantrums, that I lost the ability to speak and all I could do was scream and cry and pound my fists, and I was overwhelmed. And there were times when I was completely terrified and I was overwhelmed by my fear. And I'm allowing myself to remember that I survived. Yeah. So I'm open to the possibility that maybe it's okay that I'm overwhelmed. And I'm open to the possibility that it's okay that I have moments where I shut down, where it's too much for me and I have to check out and I have to step away and I have to decompress. That's how I'm designed. And I'm allowing myself to remember that there have been many times in my life where I have actually learned when I've learned what my boundaries are, I've learned what my needs are when I've become overwhelmed. I'm giving myself permission to continue being a high-functioning human, to continue showing up for myself and others, even with this overwhelm. This collective overwhelm and this personal overwhelm. I'm giving myself permission and support and compassion as I deal with this overwhelm in a safe and efficient way. Now, I forgot at the beginning of this, I really should have asked you to rate your level of overwhelm. So, sorry, I forgot to do that. If you can maybe just go back and try to guess at what your level was when we started. And make a note of how you're feeling in your body right now. And if you can go ahead and actually rate your level of overwhelm in this moment and write it down. So if I had to guess, I would say my level of overwhelm when we started was about a 7. And right now I'm feeling like it's about a 3. And again, this is just a brief session. You can always go back and do this again. I just want to do, like right now, we're dealing with a pretty big topic, right? So you can, now that you know this basic recipe, you can go back to some of the more specific things. Like I mentioned my stress about society, also about being a carrier of this virus. I have some anxiety and fear around infecting other people, especially vulnerable patients. I have fear about some of my close friends and family members, about how this economic shutdown is going to affect their lives, their health, their ability to provide for themselves. So I'm going to go back later and really focus on those things individually. But right now I just want to spend a little more time on keeping them lumped into one, one big ball. So I recommend that you kind of write down, make note of the things that are, at the top of your list right now. And please really consider taking the time to go back and give each of these some attention on your own. And a good suggestion is to do this in the mirror. So you can actually give yourself a session similar to what we're doing here in the mirror, using your specific words and issues. So let's go back to the ribs, jump back in. This remaining overwhelm, all of these other things. Maybe too many things to even list. Too many things to focus on. An overwhelming number of stressors. I'm choosing to have compassion for myself, for having to deal with all of these stressors. Let's go to the wrists. Yeah. Choosing to send some love and compassion to the parts of me that are feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Choosing to send some love and compassion to the parts of me that are tempted to just numb out. Yeah. And that's a pretty common practice, isn't it? We all have different ways to numb out. Watching movies, using social media, food, alcohol, work. We all have our own favorite strategy to distract ourselves, to numb out. And it's a survival mechanism. So yeah, I acknowledge myself for having all of these strategies and mechanisms to help me survive this overwhelm. And so I give myself permission to continue using these strategies if I really need to. Giving myself permission to watch a movie. Giving myself permission to have a drink of alcohol. Giving myself permission to bury myself in work. Back of the wrist. I acknowledge all of my coping strategies. And I give myself permission to do whatever it takes to get through this. Deep breath. I'm also inviting myself to notice what strategies I'm using. And I invite myself to choose the strategies most frequently that bring the greatest sense of balance and the most health to my life. Let's go to the karate chop. I acknowledge that I have the power to cope with all of these overwhelming factors in my life. And I'm choosing to support myself in using the best strategies possible. And I'm also giving myself permission to not be perfect. I can use the less healthy strategies. It's okay. But I'm also acknowledging my ability and my wisdom to choose the healthiest strategies on the most frequent basis. Deep breath. I have so many healthy ways to deal with my stressors. And just kind of do a review of your life and your likes and your wants, and think of some of your healthier strategies to deal with overwhelm. Right? Is it taking a walk? Is it taking a bath? Is it singing? Is it playing music? Talking to friends? Is it making sure that you have some type of healthy food intake during the day, right? Some vegetables and fruits. Yeah. And if you don't have a lot of healthy strategies right now, that's okay too. I invite you to use this as an opportunity to start exploring what one or two of those healthier coping mechanisms might be. Deep breath. Beginning of the eyebrows. I'm giving myself permission to relax. Giving myself permission to break down if I need to. I can break down. If I'm feeling overwhelmed at work or at home, I can always run into the bathroom, cry, throw a little private pity party, throw a private tantrum. No one else even has to know or see or hear. Yeah. I give myself permission to show up for myself. I give myself permission to break down for myself. under the eyes. I'm giving myself permission to feel whatever it is that I need to feel. Giving myself permission to ask for and receive help and support. Giving myself permission to try to feel what it feels like to be the person asking for help instead of always being the person who's giving it. And if you have to start with just yourself, then that's fine. Yeah. And so let's do that. Asking myself to help me through this. To help me through this overwhelm. I'm asking myself to help me do whatever it takes to bring myself to a place where I can process this overwhelm, where I can stay functional, and where I can start to let go of the things that are feeling overwhelming. Okay. So now I invite you to think of 2 or 3 things that you really need to hear from yourself, something that would be really helpful for you to hear right now. And I want you to tap all over your body as you say that. I hear you. I'm here to support you. It's okay to ask for help. I'm allowing you to relax. I'm allowing you to receive support. Yeah. Great. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. And again, if you have any questions, please send me an email, and I would love to connect. Thank you.